Time for a little story time with good old HCI. So get your popcorn ready, or perhaps your pillow for this boring ride we're about to go on. Just to show my nonpartisanship here, I got a little something here for the HGA crowd. This is, of course, how I'm showing I'm non-biased. This is a car that used to be an HGA 9.5 that I sent to PSA that got crossed over to a 9. Not mad at it. I expected a 9 out of it. And look at this. Showing my solidarity with Quentin. Got a little mixed bag here of Skittles. You know what? All the yellows out in there. Something was up. The missus said she wanted all the yellows. Anyway. Get your popcorn ready. Let's go. All right, everybody. Talking about HGA Tyler Hitt, the lawsuit that was brought. A little different kind of video I get into. And this information is several days old, but the point of doing this video at this point in time is something I will get to here shortly. Whether or not this turns out to be true or not, I don't give a fuck. My name's not Tyler. My name sure as hell isn't Quentin with 57 other names attached to it. So I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. All I care about is the truth. But what I'm alluding to is fake news, the generic term out there that's been used so often. An example, something that just happened. Tuesday night, we had groundbreaking testimony, and this is the only thing I'll talk about in terms of politics, just to prove the point, right? You have this individual who claimed that a certain former president tried to choke out Secret Service. But then you supposedly today have information coming out where these same Secret Service individuals are willing to testify before the committee that that stuff isn't true, never happened. Supposedly, allegedly, hoo-de-doo-de-doo-de-doo-de-doo. What's true, what's not? That's the point. That is exactly the point. So this kind of lawsuit where it's he said, she said, same kind of thing. You have the lawsuit, the complaint, QBB, B, do we need an extra B? We'll call this individual is filing this lawsuit, claiming discrimination, retaliation, basically saying that during his time of employ at HGA, that HGA was telling this individual only to hire white, straight males. Whew, white, straight males, man. HGA, if you need hire somebody, a little six-figure something, I know a white, straight male over here that'll take that coin. Those are the assertions. There's a bunch of other things. When I first saw this, and the first time I saw this, Sports Card Radio was talking about it. He had his video here, and the first thing that I questioned was the individual itself. That the individual is the one filing the lawsuit. Granted, you can obviously file lawsuits on your own, but it made me wonder, right? Say something like this happened to you or I. Would we have the wherewithal to file a lawsuit on our own behalf? Or would we contact an attorney? Now, from the way the lawsuit's presented here, it's possible that the individual filed the lawsuit himself, but it's also possible that the individual has sought legal counsel. I don't doubt that there's individuals out there that like to hire only within their preferential group. We see these businesses, women-owned business, black-owned business, all these businesses that promote their thing. Oh, we only hire women, we only hire minorities. So it was just odd to me that, and granted, I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it happens across all races and either one of the genders, that individuals have preference. But are they so outspoken about it? Especially given the fact that in the lawsuit, that HGA, specifically Tyler, would know that this individual was gay. So imagine going to a gay individual who works for your business and saying, you know, why are you hiring so many gay people? Why are you hiring so many minorities? We're going to need you to stop doing that. We're going to need you to hire only them straight white males. I'm sure it happens, but it just is somebody so ballsy or so stupid, which perhaps this individual is. I know if you listen to Sports Card Radio tell it, though, he'll tell you this individual is probably stupid enough to do it. So, hey, I'm not trying to put words in that man's mouth, but I respect what Sports Card Radio is talking about, both brothers. So I went ahead and then I watched Retro Hoop Collectibles video. He's talked about how he's interviewed Tyler or spoken with Tyler 5 or 6 times for several hours. Make sure to emphasize the fact that he's Latin, which of course, congratulations. I mean, it's obvious that he is. I don't know why he needed to emphasize it, but I think he was just trying to make a point about how kind of like the summation of his video was that he never got the vibe. That he's saying if you spend enough time around an individual, he used the analogy in his video, if you give a person enough rope, eventually they'll hang themselves. Maybe not the best analogy to use when you are talking about alleged discrimination. Given historical context, come on, baby. Obviously, I'm just joking, having some fun with it, but his point was taken, that he feels like he knows Tyler well enough and he never got that vibe off of him. So I'll link both of those videos. You guys can go ahead and check those videos out. Whenever I hear things like this, immediately, the sense goes up immediately, and I'm just so damn cynical. And there's some of you that watch my videos that can rival my cynicism. Joey, John, you guys? Yeah, you guys and several others can definitely rival my cynicism, and I don't doubt there's many others that can top mine. Whenever I hear stuff like this, the first thing that goes off in my mind is, why don't we look at the individual? Obviously, we know based on the suit itself that he's gay. He says it in his suit. So I'm like, okay, well, let's go look at what this individual's talking about. Let's go look at what Tyler's talking about. Well, here we go. Former NAACP executive, as a white person, I guess it happens. Junior associate at a law firm. I don't know the time frame. Was he a NAACP executive prior to this? He's an associate now. Was this after HGA? Maybe. I didn't look that far into it. But you're dealing with an individual that certainly, you would imagine, went to Vandy. Certainly an individual that has a higher level of book smarts in terms of intellect. Somebody that can put a suit together on their own. Or in working as a white man for the NAACP, somebody that would have connections with a lawyer. Or a host of lawyers willing to jump all over this because the alleged perpetrator matches what they need to match. Now, most of us here, aren't going to have access to those kind of individuals. I don't have anybody in my Rolodex where I can call up and be like, hey, I need a lawsuit cranked out mañana. Can you do that for me? I don't have access to anybody like that. Go through the individual's page a little bit more. Friends, we must vote. Let's hope this remains so in the coming fight for our lives. This content isn't available. Fight for our lives. June 26th, what was going on around that time? I can only assume it had something to do with Roe. We must keep pushing in the courts the end of gerrymandering and voter suppression by the radical right. So now you're using these buzz terms saying, I guess anybody who is gerrymandering or using voter suppression, if you're somebody who's requiring an individual to have an ID to vote, that you're the radical right. I think individuals should have to show ID to vote. I wouldn't feel any kind of way if I had to show an ID to vote. When I do go vote, when they ask for an ID, hey, you evil right-winger. Now is the time, more than ever, to fill out that voter registration form and file that lawsuit. I have voter registration forms for anyone who will take them. Okay, that's good. We want more people to vote, definitely. We want everyone to vote. Most of the voting populace is probably ignorant to the actual inner workings of politics, and most individuals probably can't name their own representatives. That's another issue altogether. I wish individuals were more educated and more involved in the process and kind of the whole politics, culture war, but what can you do? You can't do anything about that. I refuse to live in a nation of bondage. This coming from an individual who's filing lawsuits. It is what it is, and he is what he is. Photos, only really 2 people in his photos as far as I can tell. Well, there's family, I assume. This individual here, and this individual here, who he describes as a bestie. Okay, cool, but somebody's personal life doesn't mean anything in terms of whether or not it did or did not happen. However, when you have an individual who's basically coming out and saying, I was in this situation where this guy, this straight white, cis white male, was telling me to stop hiring so many gays and minorities, at his company and to hire more straight white males, it makes me wonder, because again, the thought crossed my mind, like, hey, what are we talking about here?
Practice. We're talking about practice, man.
Are we talking about a situation where this legitimately happened, where he was hiring the best qualified candidate, like he seemed to be saying in his suit, and Tyler is full of shit and a racist and a homophobe? Or could it possibly be a situation where you see his advocacy and you see his friend group and his whole life, I would say, and that's identity. That's how you identify, right? That's how the media breaks individuals down. So is it possible that he was overhiring based on his preferred groups? So that's how I choose to look at things. I try to look at both sides. I try to play devil's advocate on both sides. Ultimately, of course, we don't know. The information is going to come out, how it's going to come out, but you have these tweets here from Tyler. Now, when you take a look at the plaintiff, in this case, Quentin, hey, I'm equal opportunity, baby. I'm my own EEOC over here. You got to take time to look at Tyler as well. Sports Card Radio will talk a lot about how supposedly, and I don't have proof of this, I haven't looked that deeply into it, so perhaps some of you have, where supposedly you have an individual in Tyler who set up this company with his buddies to meet women. That's just what Sports Card Radio has said. Again, I haven't independently verified those allegations. Does it matter what somebody's doing in their personal life? I posed the question when I was talking about Quentin. People want to say no. I'll go back and forth on it, but I do think it matters in the sense of, well, one, okay, take a look. We have somebody here who doesn't really have much of a social media following. That's just one. Is this a new thing? Join January 2021. Why aren't there more than 11 tweets? You would think that somebody who's this raging crazy man, supposedly, would tweet more, would implicate himself more, kind of show us what he's all about. A search on Instagram found no results for Tyler Hitt. Didn't check Facebook, but the point being, of course, you have to look at both sides. You have to look at somebody's character. We all have our own biases, of course, but you need to examine all the evidence, so to speak, that's out there. And when we live in this kind of digital age, then you have to take in all this information and kind of try to piece together what makes sense, especially in these kind of he said, she said kind of things. Tyler says there's evidence, Quentin says there's this. The reality is I wouldn't want to be party to a lawsuit like this. I wouldn't want to be on one side or the other. I wouldn't have wanted to allegedly have a terrible work environment, and I wouldn't want to be having somebody accuse me of creating such a toxic environment. But the reality is that it wouldn't happen. For me, I wouldn't form a company, even if this isn't true or if it is true, allegedly, to create a situation where me and my buddies could cheat on our wives. That's what Sports Card Radio talks about. So those kind of things, they matter. And what I would just caution is before we jump to a conclusion on one side of things, just to dig into both sides of things. Try to find the truth. Tyler, Quentin, who's telling the truth? Who knows? But hopefully we get some clarity once this thing goes to trial. Potential money grab on Quentin's part? Maybe. Hoping for a settlement? Perhaps. Is he legit? 100%? Maybe. Somewhere in between? Most likely. But we'll see what happens. Let's get back to Tyler's tweets real quick. And he was actually replying to the first individual, that Paul Lesko, who was a plaintiff's attorney that I showed you at the very onset of the video. He said here there was no wrongdoing found, that the EEOC had already gone through and done an investigation. And then he says, quite the contrary, we have already prepared our statements with witness testimony and proof. We've provided over 800 texts between client and some of his employees that were very defamatory towards certain ethnicities and orientations. The EEOC has done a full investigation. So I'm just going to leave it there. That's kind of just like a basic overview, my thoughts about it. And I guess in the end, I would say this though. I would say regardless of what's going on, if you are in a situation, it's a little something I've gathered over the years. If you are somebody who's in a situation where you can hire individuals, where you're responsible for bringing people onto your team or onto your crew or whatever it may be, you should do your background research on individuals. If you see that an individual you're trying to bring in is showing themselves out there in the public eye as being somebody who's more concerned about activism, whatever that may be, whatever they're advocating for, if that is their main concern, and you can gather as much from their social media, oftentimes you can't. Oftentimes, it's too late. They already embed themselves within your company. But if you're an individual who's responsible for hiring, maybe stories like this make you want to think twice about bringing activists into your company, because it seems like this individual is just an activist. That has nothing to do with whether or not, again, Tyler, this stuff's true, false, don't care. Just a little message out there. If you have an activist resume come across your desk, or once you do your research and you come across an individual who is an activist, I would be very wary to hire somebody like that, because everything could be going good, everything could be going great, but then again, of course, they could get hired by homophobic racists. But if you have an individual like this, always understand that the activism is going to come first, and whenever you make a move to terminate them, if it's in the right, then they're going to play those cards. Whatever cards they think they can play, usually identity-based, they're going to play those cards. Now, ultimately, the courts are going to determine how this is going to work out. Evidence is going to come out. Maybe Tyler did it. Maybe Tyler did all of this stuff. Maybe he's the most horrible human being. That'll be determined in the legal system. Maybe this stuff's BS. Who knows? Don't know. Don't care. Just wanted to share my thoughts about it, and mainly my thoughts about doing a little bit more digging into people, doing a little bit more digging into stories, and my message about activists. So thanks for watching, everybody. There's obviously a lot I didn't cover here. If you've got any thoughts on this, more ideas, let me know. Happy to hear, happy to discuss. These are the kind of things in the hobby that don't paint the hobby in a positive light, regardless of whether this turns out to be true or not. Even if this turns out to be false, it's what they say, the lie makes it halfway around the world before the truth gets out of bed. So this guy is going to be painted with that brush probably forever by a certain segment in a community. And even if Quentin is found to have lied about all the stuff, fabricated all of it, if he was the one really disproportionately hiring minorities and gays, there would still be a segment of the population that is willing to go along with this, because they'll always justify that the cause is all that matters, that this was good for the cause, no matter if it's not true. There were individuals like that when Smollett and his lies were uncovered. Well, the lie was okay because the cause was more important, exposing whatever he was trying to expose. Or a situation like Christine Blasey Ford, where things were proven not true, but she would still be celebrated within certain communities. So there's just so much going on, and it just really ultimately is a bad look for the hobby, if true. And even if it's not true, then it's still going to be a situation where an individual is not going to be able to get over it. Just dig more, and then just let's wait and see what happens. We've learned so many times from all the fake news out there, we've got to just push away and just let the facts come out. Be well, everyone.